Hello YouTube do-it-yourselfers. Got a 2004 Dodge Ram 1500. This is a 4x4 version with a 5.7 liter Hemi engine. Today I have an issue with my instrument cluster. So as you can see, when I turn on the cluster, I get all my lights except this panel right here, which is where the odometer reading is. There's also some other lamps in there that are included, more around four-wheel drive, tow haul, low washer fluid, things like that. But mainly I want to fix the odometer, and also you can't really tell very well, but because it's daytime, but when I turn on the lights, the instrument cluster is not very bright, so I want to look at changing some of those bulbs. So in order to do this, I think you probably only need a Phillips screwdriver for the most part, but there's a couple of things to know. In order to get the cluster out, we have to remove the bezel around it. Part of that bezel is attached here to this vent, which is underneath this panel as well. So in order to get the majority of these pieces off, you have to pull them out. Now there are different pieces. There is a screw right over here under this hook, or above this hook in there, that will have to be removed in order to move the rest of it out. Also, we have to remove this lower panel here. I have my trailer brake control here, but I'll just leave that on there and unplug it, the cable. And also, when you get up here into the instrument cluster to remove it, you're going to have to tilt your steering wheel down to give you the most access to removing that cluster. And you'll also have to move the shift lever down as well. So I'm going to not bother you with those steps, but I'll keep jumping back and forth as I progress. Okay, now I've got pretty much access to the instrument cluster opened up. This left side panel just pulls straight out. There's just these spring clips that hold it in. I'm letting it hang from the connector, because if I disconnect that, I have my doors open and it's just going to ding because it thinks the headlights are on. And then I've removed this side panel. So again, like I said, remove the one screw. One thing I missed on the knee panel, there are just two screws at the bottom there, but they are not a Phillips screwdriver. They are a one of these Torx head screws that mine used a T20 screwdriver tip. So anyways, that just for you to know in case you don't have that. Otherwise, I'm just using Phillips. I took out these two top screws up here with a stubby screwdriver. I have two more to remove. There's one back here, and then there is also another one behind here. There's a piece of foam here to dampen vibration. You'll want to make sure you put it back, because I'm sure it'll make a noise, drive you crazy. But there's a Phillips screw head here to remove. After those are out, I'll just drop the shift lever and I should be able to work the panel out. And there'll be a number of connectors along the top of the instrument cluster that have to be unplugged as it's coming out. Anyways, that's about it. The other thing, this panel here, I unplugged the climate control panel and other things just to get it out. But one thing you may note while you're in there, if you have any lights out on your climate control panel, they can be replaced at the same time here. They're basically these. They're like the bulbs that are in the instrument cluster, so they just need a flat head to give them a quarter turn and pop those out as well. So next step will be to actually take apart the instrument cluster. I'll do that inside later on at a table, so we'll continue this in a moment. Another thing to mention while you're getting that out, this outer bezel around the instrument cluster needs to be removed first, and it just has some spring snaps at the bottom, and then there's some rubber sockets at the top that have to be removed as well. Once that's out of the way, then we can unfasten the instrument cluster. There's 2 more screws at the very top. I'm not sure that you're able to see them. There's one, and there'll be another one on the other side. And once those are out, then you'll have access to the instrument cluster and the connectors. Okay, we're inside now. It's a little cooler, 90 degrees outside today in Indiana. So I've got the instrument cluster here. We need to remove this plastic back panel here. So we have to remove all of these screws. Now they are a Torx. It's a T15 size. So I have screwdrivers. You can also get socket adapters and such. So we'll get all those off. You don't have to remove the ones on the connectors on the back here. After you get all those off, you wish this black thing would just come off, but it doesn't. This module right here has some side ears on it. Hasn't been the first trip in here for me. But after a lot of fussing around with it, what you'll find is right around this area, there's a plug that goes right into the circuit board. So you really just sort of have to pry the whole thing off. You can pry it with the plastic panel, and this part can stay with it. But it'll pop off, and it's just a Molex connector under there. There's also another light bulb that's under here for your instrument cluster. So if you've gone in and you replaced all of these bulbs and found that you still have a dead spot in the middle, there's another light under the middle of that. So I'll show you that after I get the back panel off. I forgot one thing. So like I said, the center module here, this whole black area will not come up, so you will have to work on these ears on the side here. They push away and they sit into this groove on the side of the module. So you work those loose or pry them in, and then just work on the module. But it comes off. There's your connector, the Molex connector on the circuit board, and that. So there's nothing else. The black panel here won't come off because there's one more screw underneath here, and here's that bulb I was telling you about. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of help. It's frustrating if you've ever been in here before trying to get at these bulbs. Okay, I was looking for a cold solder joint or something on the back side to see why this area of the display wasn't showing. I couldn't find anything, so I'm having to go into the panel a little more. What I had to do is take off all of the needles as well. All of the 4 outside gauges, I just made sure that the needle was pointing up, and then I pried it off basically using 2 spoons. You put one on either side of the base of the needle itself, one on one side, one on the other, and then you just push it down on both sides, and it'll bring the needle straight up. Anyways, that's how it popped off. These 2 center ones, I just made note of where they were pointing. I think they have needle stops, so you can run your instrument cluster through a calibration step. You'd have to check your car manual on how to do that, but usually it has to do with like holding in the button, turning on the key. Sometimes you have to turn the ignition 3 or 4 times, things like that. But anyways, I had to get that off. So what I'm doing now is taking this, getting at the instrument panel itself. This is the display that's not lighting up for me. Before I tried hitting it with a soldering iron on the bottom side, but I could have a cold solder joint somewhere along here on one of these top circuits. So I'm just going to reflow the solder in each one of these to make sure it's got a good connection, especially to the traces that may be on the top surface of the board. hopefully that'll do it. Also looked around, try to find parts that were that looked like they had a poor connection or had been overheated or anything that didn't quite look right. And I couldn't see anything. There's some chalkiness over here on the side. That's just some wash residue from when manufacturing, so it's nothing that would affect the board. So anyways, that's the process I'm going to go through, is just try and clean up and make sure everything has a good solder joint, and with any luck we'll fall across it. We'll find it accidentally and then put it all back together. Okay, I'm ready to put this back panel on again. One thing, when you're putting in these screws into plastic, each time you run it in, it's going to cut a new thread and eventually it'll chew up the plastic. To avoid doing that though, put the screw in and turn it backwards, and you'll feel it click when it finds the thread, and then you can just start turning it forward again. And it'll go in there almost as easily as a machine thread. A little extra force, but anyways, that's a trick that you may want to use for replacing or reusing or reassembling plastic screws. So I'm going to put these all in, and then I'm going to seat this this module again. The connector will find its place, and just clip it back in, and then we'll be all done and be ready to go back in the vehicle. Well, this hasn't really been a very successful repair. I've got it in. The panel lights up very dimly, and then when I turn the headlights on, it goes out. I put LEDs in, although I got some cheap Chinese ones that so some of them aren't even lighting up. But anyhow, yeah, if I turn that on, if I turn the dome light on or off, it doesn't have any effect on the brightness. So anyways, so the instrument cluster is back in. All the gauges seem to be working okay. I'll probably run it through a cycle. Anyways, then the rest of it is just reversing the assembly process to put everything back in. So anyways, hopefully this helps you with your project.